Some stories are so terrifying because they defy all logic and reason. They don't just scare you. They burrow into your mind and remind you that the world is a far stranger, far more sinister place than you ever wanted to believe. These are not just tales. They are echoes from the dark corners of our reality. They are proof that some doors are better left locked, and some secrets are better left untold. Turn off the lights, lock your doors, and prepare yourself for 4 true horror stories submitted by our viewers. This first story comes from a woman named Sarah. She was a young artist, barely making ends meet, so she was thrilled when she found an old rent-controlled apartment for a steal. It was on the 2nd floor, in a quiet, crumbling building, but it had a certain charm. The first few days were peaceful. She spent her time unpacking boxes, painting the walls, and turning the small, dusty space into a home. The only oddity was the room next to hers, which was sealed off with a heavy, old-fashioned lock. The landlord told her it was a storage room and not to worry about it. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard it for the first time, a soft, indistinct murmuring coming from the other side of the wall. She assumed it was just the neighbors talking, but the sound was too muffled. It was like a radio playing in another room, turned down so low you couldn't make out the words. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just the building settling, but the murmuring was a nightly occurrence. It would start at exactly midnight, a low, constant drone that went on for hours, making it impossible for her to sleep. As the weeks passed, the sound started to change. The whispers began to sound more complex, almost like a conversation, a chorus of voices, all talking over each other, but still too faint to understand. Sarah became obsessed. She would lie awake in the dark, her heart pounding, her mind racing with questions. Who was in there? What were they saying? She stuffed towels under the door, bought a massive fan to drown out the noise, and wore noise-canceling headphones. Nothing worked. The sound always found a way through the wall, seeping into her room, into her mind. One evening, in a moment of sheer desperation, she pressed her ear to the wall. She could hear the voices, a low, chilling chorus. And then, she swore she heard her own name being spoken, a faint, chilling syllable rising above the others. Sarah. Terror took hold of her. She stumbled back from the wall, her legs weak. That night, the whispers were louder than ever. They were angry now, agitated. A new sound began to mix with the voices, a wet, dragging noise, like something was being pulled across the floor. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Then, the whispers changed again. They were no longer a chorus. They were a single, dry voice. It sounded like it was right outside her door. Sarah grabbed a heavy book and slammed it against the wall, screaming for whatever was there to stop. The sound instantly went silent. But then, a single, deliberate knock came from the door. A knock from the inside. Sarah froze, her blood turning to ice. The lock was still in place. The knob began to slowly turn, just a few millimeters, and a soft, dry whisper slipped through the crack. "We're coming for you." Sarah grabbed her bag, leaving everything she owned behind, and ran out of that apartment for good. This next story was submitted by a man named Mark, who was driving through the countryside with his girlfriend, Jen. A thick, impenetrable fog had rolled in, and they found themselves hopelessly lost. The GPS died, their phones had no signal, and the road ahead was a swirling, white abyss. They pulled over next to an old, abandoned farmhouse, its windows broken and its paint peeling. It was silent and still. As they sat there, staring out into the mist, a feeling of deep dread settled over them. They both knew they shouldn't be there. Jen pointed a trembling finger at the house. "Mark, look," she whispered. On the second floor, a single window glowed with a faint, eerie red light. It wasn't steady. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Mark, a man of logic and science, tried to explain it away. "It's probably just a faulty alarm system, Jen. Or maybe a sensor light. Don't worry." But the light started to get brighter, its pulsation growing faster. Thump, 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 thump. The entire room was now bathed in a malevolent red glow. The car's interior was filled with it, and their faces were stained a horrifying crimson. The light was so bright, it cast their long, twisted shadows onto the fog outside. It was no longer a light. It was a single malevolent eye, and it was staring directly at them. Jen began to cry, her hands covering her mouth. "Let's just go, Mark. Please, let's go." He fumbled with the keys, his own hands shaking. He looked up just as the light from the house became blindingly bright, and with a final, searing flash, went completely dark. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the light itself. It was the silence of a predator who has just decided on its prey. Mark finally got the car started and slammed his foot on the gas. He drove off, but as they sped away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. What he saw made his blood run cold. The red light was gone from the window. Instead, a single, glowing red eye was looking out from the front door of the house. It blinked slowly as they drove into the night, as if to say, "I know where you're going." To this day, Mark and Jen refuse to take country roads, and they can't stand the sight of red lights. This is a story from a woman named Emily, who suffered from night terrors. For as long as she could remember, she had been haunted by the same image, a tall, slender, shadowy figure standing motionless in the corner of her bedroom. She never saw its face, only its dark outline. The figure would just stand there, watching her sleep, filling her dreams with a sense of deep, suffocating dread. She went to therapy, tried medication, but the figure always returned. The fear was so real that she would often wake up screaming, her heart hammering against her ribs. One night, exhausted from a long day, she fell asleep instantly. She woke up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. She was no longer dreaming. The figure was there, standing in the corner of her real room, just as it was in her dreams. It was a being of pure shadow, so dark it seemed to absorb all the light in the room. It was not moving, just watching her. Terror seized her. She fumbled for her phone on the nightstand to call her boyfriend, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The figure took a slow, deliberate step toward her. The floorboards didn't even creak. It took another step, then another. It was getting closer. The air grew cold, and a low, dry whispering, like rustling leaves, filled the silent room. "Do you see me now?" it seemed to say. Emily's mind screamed at her to run, but her body was frozen in place. She screamed and managed to hit the light switch. The room was instantly flooded with light, and the figure was gone. She sat there in the bright room, shaking, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was finally safe. The next morning, she looked at her phone's call history. She had successfully called her boyfriend last night and left a 15-minute voicemail. She listened to the recording, expecting to hear her panicked voice. But all that could be heard was the sound of her own frantic breathing and a low, almost imperceptible static sound, a sound that wasn't there before she hit play, a low, distorted whisper, a whisper that spoke a single chilling phrase, "I'm right behind you." And just as she heard it, a cold breath tickled the back of her neck. This final story comes from two friends, Kyle and Nick, who were walking home through a park late one night. It was a clear, moonless night, and the park was shrouded in an inky blackness. They were laughing and talking, their voices echoing in the oppressive silence, but stopped dead in their tracks when they noticed something strange. One of the swings on the playground was moving. It swayed back and forth on its own, with no wind and no one around. They stood there, mesmerized, watching it. Then they saw it. Sitting on the swing was a faint, translucent figure of a child. It was so transparent that they could see the playground equipment right through its body. It was just a faint outline, but it was there, rocking back and forth in the darkness. As they watched, the swing began to move faster. The figure started to solidify, becoming more and more visible with every terrifying swing. A low, childlike giggle echoed through the park, a sound so unnatural it made them both feel sick. The ghostly figure looked directly at them, its face now completely visible, and slowly raised a hand to wave. That was all they needed to see. They turned and ran as fast as they could, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they ran out of the park, they looked back. The one swing was no longer alone. All of the swings on the playground had started to move in a synchronized, violent motion, all swinging in unison, as if a group of ghostly children were having one final, terrifying ride. But then, as they watched, the ghostly figure from the first swing looked directly at them, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It smiled, showing a set of rotten, jagged teeth, and waved again, a gesture of pure evil. The boys never spoke about it again. But to this day, neither of them will ever go near a playground swing set, because some secrets are best left in the dark. Outro. Thank you for listening. Let me know in the comments below which of these stories you found the most terrifying. If you want to hear more true horror stories from the dark corners of the world, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Good night and sleep well.